Now, I mentioned that one of the things you might have to think about when you're planning your server deployment is whether or not you even need grub, bootloader configuration. This is what the OS is asking me right now. It has noticed that there isn't another OS on the computer. I haven't attempted any sort of dual boot configuration, and frankly, dual boot configuration is not normal in a server. If you honestly need more than one server on the same physical box, chances are what you really need is some flavor of virtualization. All these Linux boxes running under ESXi, or a Linux server playing host to, say, with VM with VirtualBox playing host to a whole bunch of virtual machines. So the system has noticed that it owns a hard drive. So it's asking me here, do I put grub into the master boot record? The answer is yes. It doesn't need to know that it's sharing the space. Now, going back to problems. Okay, boot the new system. Yay, good. So it's cleaning up after itself. It'll reboot, it'll go into, so it's killing all its processes, it's booting up, and it's rolling over very fast. If we needed to do anything resembling management, it would have, we would need to put in a BIOS delay here. Notice all these OKs, red, green, all that stuff. All that. Notice how quickly it came up. No splash screen, no X windows, none of that stuff. So I'm gonna log in. Come on. Okay. Let me see. It's memory leaks. Okay. So I am up. Okay, I am in the sudo users group. I don't remember changing the root password. See if root can do this. Okay, now I have root. That's one of the things you need to be careful with, because the sudoers group can do a lot of different things that someone with sudo privileges could conceivably lock root out. So one thing you might have to do on a properly secured Linux system is make sure that folks in the sudoers group, in the wheel group, who usually have sudo access, can't do things like change the root user's password. And notice it has already found some updates. Yeah, updates. And it is thinking. It is reaching out across the net, snagging its archives. I'm pleased that this is still working. So, going back to display issues. Let's look at. I have to check. So yeah, I have an IP address of 192.168.211.133 with a /24 mask. Blah blah blah. I have a link local IPv6, which looks like it is probably EUI 3064. I even have loopbacks. So it is. If you're having seg faults, there are some things you can do. One, try to turn off CPU cache memory. Make sure the RAM and CPU are compatible with each other in the BIOS. If you've overclocked it, unoverclock it. Usually you don't need that with a server. Let's see, if you are having root installation issues with the boot sector, you might have to move the MBR before the 8 gig mark. If this is a brand new drive, it should go in there. If this is a drive if this is a dual boot configuration and Linux is the second thing going in, you might have to move things around to make sure that it can find the MBR where it expects to find it, at least as far as the /boot directory is concerned. And if you can't move all of your / directory that far forward, maybe a little directory with just /boot in it, put it up front so it can find itself. Now, there's a lot you can do in terms of verifying your hardware settings. Look at your log files. Look at your proc setting. Your proc. Let's see. So a lot of the stuff we've talked about already still applies. It's the file hierarchy system. So the things you would expect to see in proc are still here. Your CPU. Let's do uname -a. Haha. So I'm running kernel version 1.3.13. We're up to kernel version 5, folks, so I need to update that when I can. I can look at interrupts, I can look at consoles, I can look at the CPU, cat info. It'll tell me what kind of CPU it pretends that I have. The funny thing is that Core i7 6700 at 2.6 gigahertz. Let's look at my DirectX diagnostics here just a second. Come on. Let's see if my VM is essentially, the hypervisor is essentially passing information through. And let's see. So, oh yeah, it looks like it is. Notice I have Core i7 6700, 2.6 gigahertz. So essentially the VMware is showing this virtual machine what my actual hard drive is. It's virtualizing one CPU. Basically, I could probably, you might say that the host operating system has given the VM maybe one of my cores. So it's kind of, there. Now you may not see this all the time. You may see just kind of a generic 64-bit processor, but in this case, VMware has handed the information all the way through, so I can see my physical processor on this laptop inside my virtual machine. So I see some flags. Let's turn it off. So, another fun thing, another place you can go is actually dmessage. Now, dmessage is everything that's coming off the kernel. Let me grep for toutlook, because I do notice there seem to be. Let's try journal control. Okay, so the journaling file system is not there. Well, I'll figure this out. There seems to be some kind of memory leak, and I do need to figure it out. Okay, so you can look at your CPU to figure out what kind of information is there. There's a lot of fun stuff going on here. You can look. Okay, let's look at cat. Let's see how much memory we have. Cat, come on, you. Meminfo. So let's less meminfo. That seems to be. So I can. All this is in kilobytes. So you might have to do some math. But I gave it 4 gigabytes. So that top line makes a lot of sense. Let me see. No. If you have some sense of what kind of issue is wrong, you can drill down through here. The bottom line is if Linux doesn't even see all the memory you think it should see, figure out why. Is there a problem in the BIOS? Is there a problem with which version of Linux you're using, and can it use as much memory as you're handling, etc.? If you want to see kind of what kernel modules you have, there are actually a couple ways to do this. if you less modules. So these are all the kernel modules that are currently installed. There's another way to do this. The lsmod command will do more or less the same thing. So if you have drivers that you need in the system but are not there, you can chase that down with the insmod command or modprobe. Or you might, if you're really worried about that, you might have to recompile your kernel. Compile the modules you need right into the kernel. And you can do that. Let's see, and there's a lot in here. Let me maximize this. There is a lot in the proc directory. Proc is proc is one of those directories that exists at runtime. All of your running processes, modules, mounted file systems, a lot of this, there's a lot of ways to get to a lot of this stuff. Say the mount command. Actually, let's look at that one. Your swap space, your version, K-message, your core, I/O memory, a lot of information. There's a lot of very useful information here. If you're dealing with a thorny problem, you can start dealing with it you can start with this information, start with the information coming off the kernel, and try to, and at least essentially begin your research there. So, and let me see. So I showed you all dmessage. The other place to look for this is, let's try var boot. Let me see. Clog. So, boot. So it's var log boot log. Less boot dot log. Notice everything that scrolled across the screen, all that starting stuff and OK stuff, all that. Now, granted, this thing tends the logs may be a little goofy because the colorization is gone. So you may have to ignore the strange numerics and the escape sequences, but a lot of it is here. Notice it seems to have come up pretty well. It started a whole bunch of stuff. It started Tomcat, System 5, all of it. So you could look there for some of your information. So var log is extremely useful. I'm also going to go look at var syslog to figure out what this memory allocation thing is. With Fedora, journal control will show you the same. Journal control -b will show you the same information. Journal control exists in all modern versions of Fedora. Obviously, it doesn't exist in Ubuntu. With Ubuntu, we may have to look at the old-fashioned syslog and the var log directories. Just know what operating system you're running, how it logs its things, whether it's using the init system or systemd, and then, well, we're almost done. We're just going to talk about system rescue. So, be right back.